All right, I'll go ahead and dive into the intro here. This is Michael Brody-Waite. We have him with us today. He is an acclaimed speaker, Inc. 500 entrepreneur, award-winning three-time CEO, a leadership coach, and author of Great Leaders Live Like Drug Addicts: How to Live Like Your Life Depends on It. And you can see that right over his shoulder in the background there. He's also been named a Most Admired CEO, Top 40 Under 40, and Healthcare Entrepreneur of the Year by Nashville Chamber of Commerce. Michael's TEDx Nashville YouTube video, Great Leaders Do What Drug Addicts Do, is the #1 talk in the history of TEDx Nashville. It's been seen by over 1 million people and in more than 25 countries, and it provides insight into his 17-year journey from addict and near homelessness to a successful entrepreneur. This talk also sparked the mask-free movement and brought awareness to Michael's mask-free program, built on 3 principles inspired by his recovery, essentially for leading your best life. Today, Michael is going to share a little of his story with us and also introduce the mask-free program and 3 principles for mastering authentic leadership. These principles, if practiced 1 minute per day, will help you remove the masks you wear and improve individual and team member productivity and motivation. So, Michael, it is an honor to have you with us today. I'm winded from all of your accolades.
Me too.
We also have a second guest online with us here, Kristen McLean. Kristen works with the Vivid Ink Company, where they turn written word, like the webinar we're about to see, into memorable works of art. So her product from today will be included in the recap you receive afterwards. As a refresher, you guys, this will be recorded and you'll be able to view it later, share it with your team. And this is also an interactive session. So acknowledge the Q&A, the chat, the raise hand features at the bottom of the screen. Get familiar with those. And with that, I will hand it over to Michael.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that intro. It's always embarrassing when someone reads off that stuff. I prefer maybe we just introduce me this way. Hi, I'm Mike, and I am a drug addict. It feels a lot better. That's what I do everywhere. So why do great leaders live like drug addicts? Well, this is going to be an interactive session, but let me set it up. So as we covered, 18 years ago, my daily habit was to use alcohol and drugs from the minute I woke up to the minute I passed out at night. I was kicked out of college. Was fired from my job, kicked out of my house. My car was repossessed. The only money I had was what I could steal from my friends. And at the age of 23, I was throwing up blood, and I knew that I would not live to see my 30th birthday. Fun fact, this is like sad but funny, but my doctor told me the only thing higher than my liver enzymes was me. And that's one of the reasons I knew that I would not live very long. And so I know it's kind of weird when I declare that great leaders live like drug addicts, that I think leaders should run their organizations like addicts. But here's why. I know a thing or two about leadership. We already read off the accomplishments, but climbing the corporate ladder at a Fortune 50 company taught me about leadership. Founding an Inc. 500 company taught me about leadership. Selling it to a publicly traded company taught me about leadership. Running a nonprofit that helped 2,000 entrepreneurs start or grow a business every year was huge. And then doing the TED Talk, I'm honored by that. It's got over 2.2 million views. And I wrote the book. And honestly, I am so bored of saying that stuff. I don't care about my freaking ego, dude. The reason that I say that stuff is because it's testimony to what I'm going to share with you today. And that is that great leaders live like drug addicts. In my journey from being a homeless drug addict with no college degree to a leader, I learned a few things. And so when I say great leaders are like drug addicts, you might be wondering, what the heck do I mean? What I mean is 2 different things. When I see our old definition of leadership, I think of a general on the battlefield, a corporate CEO pretending that they never have any weaknesses, fixing, managing, and controlling perception to get what they want, the same way that a drug addict fixes and manages and controls perception to get the next hit. The great leaders in our future will lead in a fundamentally different way. And the only people that have been systematically trained and in this new authentic model for leadership are recovering drug addicts. Now, this isn't the first time that you've heard about leadership, and especially with Petra, you guys have heard it a million times. It's probably not the first time you heard an act tell their story. Unfortunately, we are all touched by addiction. And so to level the playing field, to show how the leadership and addiction affects everybody, if you have been affected by addiction in any way, someone you know, someone you love is affected by addiction, type addict into the chat and you will see that you're not alone. So here's what is new. Here's what you're going to hear here for the first time that you haven't heard anywhere else. I'm going to show you how to take the system that millions of addicts use to recover around the world every day and apply it as a leadership system that can empower anyone to be truly great. And thank you. I see the addicts rolling in. Sounds like an awkward thing to say, doesn't it? But I'm grateful for the identification. So by the end of today, the incentive to not multitask while you're watching this is I'm going to equip you with one competitive advantage that 90% of professionals don't have. A competitive advantage that will get you 500 hours a year back of your time. And a competitive advantage that will answer this question. What if the worst thing about you became the best thing about you? So as you listen to this talk, you guys have a job, right? When I'm watching Zoom, and even if it's interesting content, if I don't have something I got to do, I get disengaged. Your job is to ask yourself how brave you really are. Over the course of the next 20 minutes, as we do some talking, we're going to go into some interaction at the end, and I'm going to ask you to think about what's your greatest weakness, the biggest weakness that you're not sharing with people. And for those of you that are brave, that want to learn how to live and lead in a different way, I'm going to ask you to share at the end. So get ready. As you go through this, I'm going to give you some examples, and I want you to see if you can identify your weakness. And the most vulnerable share will win a coaching session with me, which arguably has no value or a lot of value, depending on who the eye of the beholder is. And I will, in that coaching session, show you how to take the worst thing about you and turn it into the best thing about you professionally. So the same way I turned being a drug addict into the reason that I am here today. Okay, so your job is to think about your greatest weakness and get ready to share or not share and watch other people share. Now, we have a saying in recovery.
One thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is turn your chats from panelists to panelists and attendees so everyone can see your chat. Right now, only Michael and I can see it.
Oh, yes, we all want to see it. There were a bunch of people that typed in addict. All right, so we have a saying in recovery: a head full of recovery will screw up your using. Once you know it, you can't use the same way again. So my job today is to screw up your leadership. And here's how I'm going to start. I'm going to start by telling you a story. When I was in active addiction, my dad would take me to breakfast every month or two. He would say he wanted to buy me some food, but I knew it was he just wanted to see that his son was still alive. And there were three things that I would do on that day, other than wear this heinous shirt that I swear I donated and I will never wear again. There are three things that I did that drug addicts do. The first thing is that I would say yes to something that I should say no to. I would get high before I would go see my dad. The second thing is I would hide my weakness. I wouldn't talk about how much I was struggling, and I would pretend that things were okay. And the third thing is when he talked about an intervention or getting clean or anything like that, I would avoid that difficult conversation like the plague. And as a result, I would prevent solutions. That's what being a drug addict is like. And here's my definition: doing the same thing repeatedly despite negative consequences. Every day I did these three behaviors. So let's see what you guys have in common with an addict. I want you to go ahead and stand up. Now, we can see a lot of your cameras. So yes, I mean it, Mike. They're like, Mike, do you really mean stand up? Yes, you won't have to stand up long. Get up out of your seat, stand up, and I'm going to ask you guys three questions. And I do have people outside your house to make sure that you remain standing until you've answered the question. That's a lie. The first question, I'm going to ask you three questions. And if you answer yes to one of them, you can type yes into the chat and go ahead and take a seat. The first question: in the last 30 days, have you said yes to something that you could have said no to? If so, type yes into the chat and go ahead and have a seat. Now, as addicts that are addicted to drugs, we say yes to all kinds of things. Not meetings. We say yes to drugs, but you may not be an addict. So you're saying yes to meetings, emails, tasks, projects, events that you know are not the best use of your time. We're dying in this. We're drowning in this. And all the yeses prove it. Look at all these yeses. Second question: in the last 30 days, have you hid a weakness? As an addict, I hid the fact that I was a drug addict, but maybe you're hiding the fact that you need some training or a mentor, or you're simply having trouble saying, I don't know. If you can identify with that, type yes and go ahead and take a seat. Third one: avoiding difficult conversations. In the last 30 days, have you avoided a difficult conversation? Now, I avoided a difficult conversation that could lead to my freaking recovery, but maybe you're avoiding a performance management conversation. or giving your boss some feedback and scared about how they'll react, or setting a realistic expectation with a customer. Now you see all the yeses and one no, which that wasn't part of the prompt, but that's okay. You see all the yeses and you realize this isn't great leadership, guys. I go and I talk to a group of 2,200 or 2,000 people and I ask 3 questions and everybody's taking a seat and they're all doing something that drug addicts do. That's a failure in leadership, but we are all suffering from it. So what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes and imagine a world where we are truly the best leaders of our own life, personally and professionally. Close your eyes and imagine this. Imagine canceling every unimportant meeting on your calendar and creating huge blocks of time to focus on what's most important. Imagine a Saturday where you don't worry about your to-do list and you just connect with your partner. Imagine telling your boss or your team what you really think about the project that they love that you're not sure about. Imagine having 30 extra minutes every night with your children and not checking your phone during bath time. Big thing in my house. Imagine the relief of finally having the difficult conversation with that friend or family member that you've been stepping around. Imagine growing faster because you had the courage to share your weaknesses at work. How badly do you want that future? Type heck yes or hell yes into the chat if you want that future. By the time we're done today, I'm going to tell you the next step, the exact thing that you can do to make that happen. So we talked about these 3 behaviors. I've assessed, and I love seeing the yeses. I've assessed over 2,000 leaders from the boardroom to the mailroom. And what is holding back leadership are these 3 behaviors. And these are the 3 behaviors that addicts use in active addiction. I've worked with companies like Google and Dell and HCA and Global Payments, nonprofits, startups, everybody. I don't care what your role is. They're just wasting 10 hours a week or 500 hours a year doing these 3 things. And we're wasting our potential, even though we know we shouldn't do them, but we're doing it anyway. And so if you identify with that, and I can tell that you do by the chat, that I want you to consider something. It's possible that you are an addict. I know you thought this story was going to be about my addiction, but it's not. It's about yours. So welcome, dude. This is your intervention. And I'm here to tell you that a life-changing future is possible. It's not only possible, it's probable. All you have to do is accept the possibility that you are an addict. It was extremely uncomfortable for me to accept that. Extremely. But if you can accept it, it will change your freaking life the same way it changed mine. So let's talk about the consequences of your addiction. Saying yes when you could say no. Workers spend on average 31 hours a month in unnecessary meetings. Type how many hours do you think you spend a month in unnecessary meetings? Well, I tell you this story. This is Melinda. She's a manager of 19 people at a mid-sized bank. During the pandemic, she was processing triple P loans. She couldn't possibly keep up with her inbox. She was scared to let her bosses down, scared to let her direct reports down. She didn't want to let anyone down. As a result, she wasn't setting realistic expectations. She wasn't saying no. She wasn't delegating because her team was already overloaded. And she felt like she was chasing her to-do list all day and chasing her inbox all day, staying up to like 10 p.m. at night, trying to get everything done. Hit +1 in the chat if you can relate to Melinda's plight. Maybe not every day, but on some days. When she realized that what she had was an addiction to saying yes, things changed. She started saying no when she realized it was an addiction and started applying the principles that addicts use to recover to this problem. And now she stops working at 5 p.m. and saves on average 10 hours a week. And guess what? The team's better, the bosses are better, the customer's better. And that's what happens when you quit an addiction. You think it's going to hurt, but what it does is it helps. Let's talk about hiding a weakness. This is Emily. She's a 30-year-old prodigy that's a consultant for a healthcare client. She has a $3.5 million contract that her company trusts her to manage, and her client brought her a problem that she didn't know how to solve. Now, the right thing to do would be to tell the customer, I don't know how to solve this, right? Or tell your boss that you don't know how to solve this. But she already felt like an imposter because she's young. She's worried that she's not going to be able to figure it out. And she's going to get found out for being the imposter that she is. She's terrified to say anything. And the saying, fake it till you make it, is rolling around in her head. Hit +1 if you can relate to Emily, if you've ever felt like, wow, they're going to find out that I don't know how to do my job. When she realized this was an addiction, things changed. And she applied the principles that addicts use to recover. And she ended up telling her boss that she didn't know the answer. He didn't know the answer. The client didn't know the answer. So everyone worked together to solve the problem. By the end, her boss trusted her more than anyone on her team. The client loved her and she got promoted. And that's what happens when you quit an addiction. We're addicted to hiding a weakness, but when you quit that addiction, you think it's going to hurt, but what it does is it helps. Avoiding difficult conversations. Do you know 70% of employees are avoiding a difficult conversation right now with a boss, a coworker, or a direct report? How many difficult conversations do you think you avoid in the average month? Type your guess into the chat. It's a lot. Here's Son. He is the CEO of one of the top personal branding agencies in New York, and the pandemic hit him hard and stalled out his business. And he decided he just wanted to be an advisor. He wanted to let his team go. And as a result, he didn't need his office anymore. He had 6 months left on a lease that was $12,000 a month, and he was working out of his home paying for this lease. And he knew what he should do is ask the landlord to be released. But he knew the landlord was struggling. He hates conflict. He knows asking to get let out is what's best for him, but he wasn't going to do it because it was so uncomfortable. Hit +1 in the chat if you know that right now you're avoiding a difficult conversation that is actually good for you. This is what we do. Thank you. I see the activity in the chat. Well, once Son realized that avoiding difficult conversations is an addiction, he talked to the landlord. They let him out of his lease. He felt 1,000 pounds lighter and he saved $72,000. And that's what happens when you quit an addiction. You think it's going to hurt, but what it does is it helps. Now, I know at this point in this program, you're like, dude, Mike, I've got great education, man. I've read the books. I took the online course. I went to the workshop. Well, how's that education working for you? How long after the book on saying no did you start saying yes again? How long after the TED Talk on vulnerability did you stop volunteering your deepest fears? How long after the training on difficult conversations did you start dancing around topics again? See, I got education too. Anyone remember the DARE program? Yeah. I watched the Lifetime movies. I talked to the police officers. I read the books on addiction. And guess what? You can tell an addict to just stop using, but it won't work. I knew I should stop using. That didn't stop me. My family and friends told me. I agreed with them. I didn't stop using drugs. I saw cautionary tales of other people dying, and I agreed I should stop, but I didn't. Addiction doesn't stop because of knowledge. And so if you're wondering, I know I should say no. I don't know why I'm doing. I submit to you, it's an addiction. Knowledge doesn't stop us from using. It doesn't stop from the desire to stop. Tell an addict to stop until you're blue in the face and nothing happens, but you tell them what to start and recovery starts taking place. But you got to tell them something specific. And that's what I got as an addict. I woke up September 1st, 2002 at the Betty Ford Center in Rancho Mirage, California, in a surreal moment where I woke up in rehab. And guess what? They didn't tell me to stop using. They told me what to start. And I don't just mean anything. They gave me a specific step-by-step program designed to overcome addiction. And for those of you who understand this stuff, a 12-step program, in fact. And it was so simple and so hard. Now, here's the deal. When I was in treatment, one of the first things they did, and this is really ironic in a pandemic because this happened 18 years ago, is they slapped 2 blank masks, like paper mache type masks, on the table in front of me. And they said, decorate one to look like the person that you show other people, and decorate one to look like the person that you think you really are. And so when one I showed that to other people had like athletes and celebrities and money and cars and designer clothes and all this stuff that made someone look good. And the one that looked like the person that I was a really sad, lonely boy, a drug addict that was desperate and lonely. And here's where the connection between my addiction and your leadership becomes clear. The thing they taught me in rehab was that I was addicted to wearing a mask as much as I was to the drugs. It was the mask that helped me pursue the drugs, the same way a mask helps a leader pursue success. So let's see what this looks like in the real world. This is all philosophical. This is great, Mike. I love inspirational philosophical stuff, but I got some real problems I got to deal with. Okay, I got you. Let's go back to Sam Goody. Okay, this is the story I tell. Now, if you're familiar with Sam Goody, that means you're older than me or my age, and you're not younger than me. All right, so I get into a halfway house out of rehab and they tell me I got to get a job. And so I go interviewing a bunch of places. And if I don't get a job in 5 days, they're going to kick me out. And I get one interview instead of Sam Goody. Now, if you're older than me, Sam Goody's a record store. If you're my age, it's a CD store. And if you're younger, you're like, what the F is Sam Goody? If you do remember, type Goody got it into the chat. There's some of us that are still out there, but we used to actually have to go into a physical store to buy CDs. So anyhow, I'm driving into this interview and I call my sponsor. I'm like, what do I say when they ask me about my gaps in my resume, dude? Because they're not going to hire me. And this is the only shot I've got. Now, you guys, you're not addicts, most of you probably, but you may not be able to relate to me talking to my sponsor about my fear of telling them about the fact that I'm an addict, but you can relate to not wanting to tell someone the worst thing about you in a professional job interview. And so my sponsor says, just tell them the truth. And I'm like, dude, you don't understand. If I tell them the truth, I won't get the job. They'll kick me out of the halfway house. I'll be on the street. I'll probably be dead in a year. So you got to give me something better than that. And he said to me, he said, no, dude, you don't understand. This isn't about the job and it's not about the house. You don't learn how to share your weaknesses and have difficult conversations. You won't stay clean and you won't live. Hit +1 in the chat. I love the goody got it. Hit +1 in the chat if you can relate to being scared of sharing something deeply personal and scary about you in a professional situation. Here's another story for you. See if you can see yourself in this one. 8 years later, I've left a corporate career where I'm making good money, ascending the corporate ladder. And at the height of the recession, I think it's a great idea to leave that and co-found a startup. Our mission is to reinvent access to healthcare, but we have no investors, no connections, no patents, no experience. But I maxed out my credit card, drained a bank account, and withdrew everything in my 401k in the middle of a recession, having never done it before. And we found ourselves quickly running out of cash. And so we pitched one of our hospitals. We had 6 hospitals under contract, and one of our hospitals was linked to a network of 50, and we pitched them on an enterprise deal. And after months of work, they said yes. And that's what was going to save us. We were going to go from thousands in revenue to millions overnight. But the reason I remember that time so distinctly is because in November 2010, the day after they said yes, we experienced a software failure with that hospital. And not just a failure that like a little bug, one that breached our contract that we had to notify them within 24 hours. Now, when I found out about this, I knew we were toast. I knew we would lose the expansion, run out of money, lose the customer. My employees would be looking for jobs. I would be bankrupt, and our entire dream would be down the toilet. And just 24 hours before, we were celebrating about getting a 7-figure contract. And then my partner says, hey, man, we could still be successful. Let's just not tell them. Now, my partner wasn't morally corrupt. He had a point because our software had only impacted one patient at one hospital. It didn't hurt them, and the patient didn't know, and the hospital didn't know. So here I am. I've never led a startup before, but I've got 8 years clean, and I'm not worried about drugs anymore. I'm facing the temptation of hiding a weakness and avoiding a difficult conversation as the leader of a startup. This had nothing to do with drugs. Hit +1 if you can relate to thinking that if you do the next right thing, you're going to ruin your career. And so the temptation was to not tell them. And so here's the deal. You can tell a leader to just stop overcommitting, just stop being inauthentic, stop working at 5 p.m. But this stuff is scary, dude. As an addict, I've been trained to see myself in other people's experiences. Well, I just told you two stories that aren't about addiction. And so I want to ask you, do you see yourself in my stories? And if so, think of one instance where you are saying yes, where you could say no recently, where you're hiding a weakness, where you're avoiding a difficult conversation. You can take all the workshops you like, read all the books that you want. You knew you shouldn't say yes. You knew you should share your weakness. You knew you shouldn't avoid the difficult conversation, but you did it anyway. Why? It's because we aren't talking about the real problem. The same way when I got kicked out of college, got my car repossessed, got kicked out of my house, the problem wasn't the college, the car, or my house. It was my addiction. So the reason leaders aren't getting better is because we haven't diagnosed the real problem. And the problem is addiction. Just as I was addicted to my mask to get my next hit, leaders are addicted to their mask to get their next promotion. And it costs us big time. Like I said, I've worked with over 2,000 leaders, from the CIO of a public company with 6,000 employees to an entrepreneur that has no employees and they're completely on their own, and everyone in between. And we are all paying a significant cost for mask addiction, me included. So which one are you paying most? Type in the chat. Is it time? Is it growth? When we hide our weaknesses, we stifle our own growth. Is it connection with others? When we share our vulnerability and our humanity, we lose the ability. We are able to connect with others, and when we hide that, we're not able to connect with others. Is it innovation? When we empower our entire team to take off the mask, blind spots get detected, innovation gets unlocked. Or is it just success? Feeling successful because you were your one true self in your professional life and you came home without a mask on? I see it. I see a lot of different answers in the chat. So we're all paying the cost for this mask addiction. And so here's the deal. What do you do about this? Well, I was equipped with a step-by-step process to treat my addiction, a process that helps millions of addicts around the world, a process that helped me face that fear of saying no, the fear of sharing weaknesses, and the fear of having difficult conversations. It was a step-by-step process that I used in that interview with Sam Goody, where I told the manager that I was an addict that just got out of rehab that needed the job, and he gave me the job anyway. A step-by-step process that I used to climb the corporate ladder at a Fortune 50 company. And I got 8 promotions in 8 years because I aggressively shared my weaknesses more than the next person. A process I used to lead my startup, where in that story where we had the software failure, I called up the customer and I said, hey, we effed up, we failed. And instead of canceling our contract, they laughed. And when I asked them why, they said, no one else ever tells us when they mess up one patient. When I get a call like this, it's because 20 have been affected. And then they trusted us more than anyone else. A step-by-step process that led to us becoming an Inc. 500 company, having never raised a dollar and having billboards all across the nation advertising our product. A step-by-step process that I taught my team that had no competitive advantage. We had no investors, no connections, no patents, no Ivy League degrees, people that had everyone on our team had never taken a startup from 0 to 1 million revenue, let alone 10. And we went up against companies with 150 million in venture capital, but we were voted the best place to work. We won an Inc. 500 award. We grew 20,000% in less than 6 years, and we were acquired by a publicly traded company because we did the thing that drug addicts do. We used a step-by-step process based on 3 principles that I describe in my book, Great Leaders Are Like Drug Addicts. Practice rigorous authenticity, surrender the outcome, and do uncomfortable work. When you practice these 3 principles, that's what we learn essentially in a 12-step program. You learn how to lead yourself in a fundamentally different way. And so I decided, why do addicts have to have the exclusive access to training for these principles? And I created a 12-step like process for everybody else so that you can recover from your addiction too. And now what we do is to help, you get clean. An addict in order to get clean from drugs, I need to go to rehab. We have created a rehab for leaders. It is the world's first mask rehab. We're normal leaders like everybody else. Like, this is George. He's the owner of a $65 million company. We trained his team in this step-by-step process, and they realized that they were addicted to saying yes when they could say no. And they identified that they could save $1 million just by stopping a couple of things, just by turning down unprofitable projects, just by saying no to meetings that aren't sales so they could sell more, just by having better employee engagement and performance management. We even had a leader that was listening to his wife better after he learned this process. This is the leadership team for global marketing at Google. And guess what? Googlers are awesome. They're smart, but they're a little too nice. And so when they would have offsites, they wouldn't challenge each other. And as a result, they would walk out overwhelmed with all these priorities and plans that they had to chase. We taught them this step-by-step process that addicts used to recover, how to practice rigorous authenticity, surrender the outcome, and do uncomfortable work. And they had the best planning session ever. They had a different strategy. So I'm on a mission to help everyone recover. So if you want to have the most authentic 3 hours of your life, and you want to join a room full of leaders that are focusing on overcoming saying yes when they could say no, hiding weakness, or avoiding difficult conversations because they don't want to miss their life, you should check out a mask rehab. Addicts need awareness of their problem in order to solve it. Well, in our rehab, you walk out with a list of 10 different situations where you wear masks. Addicts need to understand their consequences in order to be motivated to change. Well, in our rehab, you calculate your costs in our method that makes it super clear what masks cost you, how they hurt your team, how they hurt your organization, and the people that you love. Addicts need a step-by-step system in order to recover. Well, in our RAST rehab, you get trained in the equivalent of the 12 steps so that you can use them over and over again to not use your drug of choice, which would be saying yes, hiding a weakness, or avoiding a difficult conversation. And just like an addict, when they get out of rehab, you get supported with coaching and community for 28 days after. And we do this for public and for private. So you can do an individual ticket as a consumer, you can do it for a team. And so if you're interested in this, type into the chat your name and your email address. You can do private chat to me if you don't want people to see your email address. But what you'll do if you send that to us is we'll set up a free 20-minute mask assessment so you can sample our process and learn which mask is holding you back. And we've partnered with Petra to give you guys a discount. Individual tickets to this 3-hour mask rehab are usually $500. You can get it for $295 as a Petra partner. And for teams, it's usually $15,000, but you can get it for $7,500 for your team. Just put your name and email in the chat or private message it to me. And all of this revenue doesn't go to me personally. It funds the mask-free movement because we are on a mission to revolutionize the rules of leadership by teaching leaders how to overcome their addiction. So I told you at the beginning of this, I wanted you guys to be able to think about a weakness that you are holding on to. And so I'm going to do something to inspire you to share it, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to share it. I want you to look at this quote. It's my favorite, but it's also sad. To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best day and night. Okay, I take that to be at work and in your personal life. Doing its best day and night to make you like everybody else means to fight the hardest battle, not a hard battle, the hardest battle, which any human being can fight. And guess what? You don't win it once, just like you don't recover from drugs once. You have to stay in recovery, the hardest battle which any human being can fight, and never stop fighting. You want to build a differentiated work experience? Don't give people a catered lunch. Teach them how to win this battle so they can reclaim their life. And so before we get into the shares, I want you to know, I know it can be scary to think of this as an addiction and uncomfortable. Well, I want to leave you with this question. What if the worst thing about you could become the best thing about you? What if a drug addict could use his addiction to become a leader, a father, and a husband? And what if you accepted your addiction and started using a step-by-step process to overcome your fear and say no to everything that isn't important? Stop fearing sharing your weaknesses and have all of the difficult conversations that you've been holding on to. You're sitting on an incredible opportunity to unlock truly great leadership. And I know for certain that there is a great leader living inside of each and every one of you. But if you want the world to see it, you're going to have to do what drug addicts do. And so that's the end of the formal presentation. And I will stop um, spitting at the screen and making you guys feel like, oh my God, what is this guy saying? And what I want to do now is say, I started this off by saying, I'm going to equip you with the one competitive advantage that can differentiate you from 90% of the professionals out there. But right now, you can practice it, like literally right now. I asked you to identify your biggest weakness. There's 31 people on here. And so I know it's scary, but for those of you that are brave, I'm going to ask you to type share into the chat or raise your hand so that we can unmute you. And I want you to share a weakness that you've been holding on to. And the most vulnerable share will get that free coaching session with me where I'll teach you how to take your greatest weakness and turn it into a professional superpower. Now, here's the deal. Simon Sinek wrote a book called Great Leaders, or something. He didn't write Great Leaders, or something like Leaders Eat Last. Authentic leaders go first. So before I ask you, the audience, to be vulnerable and to get up in front of a bunch of people, and I don't see any shares in the chat, type share into the chat. You're going to share your weakness. I'm going to model it. I have a share. Thank you. So I'm going to model what this looks like. So recently, I lost my mom in January. And I realized that I didn't know how to do grief. And so I was hiding a weakness because I needed time to grieve. But I was scared to say no to business opportunities and meetings. And I felt stupid for saying, I have to grieve my mom. So I went through our process and I created what we created as a simple mass reaction card where I was hiding a weakness. And I started telling people that I can't do that meeting because I need to grieve my mom. I'm trying my hardest to experience grief, not because I want to be noble, but because I know if I don't feel these feelings, my wife, my daughter, my son, and myself and my business will pay the price. And it was so hard. And right now, I am still struggling to defend time to grieve my mom. And I'm saying yes to things that I should say no to right now that are costing me the opportunity to drive around and talk to Holly. And that's something that I need to continuously work on. So that's my share. And I see that we've got 2 shares set up already. Please, if you feel inspired, this is the opportunity. This can be the beginning of you living and leading mask free. I'm going to ask that we unmute Michelle so she can share the weakness that she thought of during this. And Michelle, thank you for being the first person to say share.
Michelle, you should now be unmuted.
And I'll stop sharing my
Can you hear
screen.
me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I'm surprised I was the first one, but so I am so afraid of being wrong about anything that I will just not participate, or if somebody asks me a question in a meeting, I clam up completely, which is a big problem in a board meeting. So yeah, I'm afraid of being wrong or making a mistake.
Michelle, thank you so much for sharing that. Now, to show you support, and I don't want you to unmute just yet, or to go back to mute, to show support for Michelle, hit +1 in the chat if you can relate to not speaking up because you don't want to be wrong. Because you aren't alone. See the +1s rolling in. So the thing is that one of the things that we teach in our program is that people often hold back their unique perspective. And great leadership, Michelle, is the willingness to take an unpopular stance. That's leadership. And a unique perspective isn't unique if everybody agrees. And all of the great things that have happened in this world happened because somebody was willing to share their unique perspective. And so my question to you is, I struggle with this. You see all the +1s rolling in. What is the fear, like the deep down fear, like your nightmare scenario that would happen if you were to share your unique perspective in that board meeting?
Probably that everyone would think I'm crazy and I'd get fired.
Right. And so that is a very valid, emotional, vulnerable fear. And so that your ability to tap into what's actually happening inside of you is amazing. But now I want you to put that really smart, analytical, cerebral, academic hat that you have on. What do you think is a statistical probability that you would get fired for sharing your unique perspective?
I don't really know.
So, and you know what? You just did the thing that so many people struggle with. You said, I don't know. So like that's modeling living and leading mass free right there, because people think they need to have an answer. So here's what I'll tell you. Most people, when they go through, we have an exercise called the fear factor, and it doesn't involve Joe Rogan or eating cockroaches. And what we do is we have them go through the emotional fear and then the intellectual fear. And what they find is that the fear feels about a 9 out of 10. Like, oh my God, I will get fired. But when we actually reason through it and go through it, it's usually like a 1 or a 2 out of 10, like actual probability that the worst nightmare will happen. And so what people find is that we are holding ourselves back because we are believing a level of fear inside of us that is distorted. And what that is it's the fight or flight mechanism in our body triggering adrenaline flowing through, narrowing our field of vision and getting into a very either reactive or extremely active and aggressive state. And that's what's happening when we hold back our unique perspective in a board meeting is we're literally scared for our survival, because if the people don't agree or don't like it, we're going to get kicked out. But let me ask you something, Michelle. And this is going to be the last question, then you can go back to mute. You're like, why do you pull me up here, Brody-Waite? I didn't sign up for this. Do you respect other people that are willing to take an unpopular stance more or less?
Definitely more, because I think it's important to hear those things.
Awesome. So I'm clearly like asking a leading question, and it ruined my whole shtick here if you were to say less. But that is what most of us believe. And so we all see the movie where the person does it and they're right. But what I'm really proud of are the times where I see people do it and they're wrong, and they survive anyhow, and they lead themselves. And that's like, you got the 10,000 hours thing, you got to master something. So for you, I'm not saying any of this to minimize what you shared in any way. I'm doing it to tell you that we are all with you. And I promise you that in that room, everyone, not everyone, but most of the people are probably feeling a similar way, a similar feel. So Michelle, thank you for sharing your weakness. And I want you to know you are not alone. But your ability to overcome that weakness, to overcome that fear, just may help somebody by identifying something that nobody saw. Michelle, thank you for that. Okay, I saw the next share was David. And if you want to share, remember, it's a competition for who can be most vulnerable. We actually do this to normalize vulnerability. We're tricking your reward system in your brain. You want to suddenly become part of this group that can be vulnerable, as opposed to be part of the group out there that pretends they're all good. So as you listen to David, ask yourself, am I willing to be the next person that shares a weakness? David, what did you come up with?
Yeah, so probably my biggest weakness that I have encountered over the past 10 to 12 years is feeling like I don't deserve good things because stupid things I did as a teenager, bad decision making. And I placed that on work as well. Like I should not get a promotion, or I should not, strike out my own, or whatever it is, because if someone knew, similar to how you were talking about Sam Goody, if someone knew, then they would never want. And it is a fear thing that I know is not 100% true, but that fear is paralyzing.
So thank you for sharing that. What is an example of how that shows up for you and how that hinders your ability to participate?
It showed up today. In fact, my boss was talking about, we just recently had some transition in leadership due to a death of our president. And so we were just talking about what it looks like for him going forward. He's now the owner. He's now the president. What does that look like going forward? The contingency plan. And there's a part of me that kind of wanted to stand up and go, well, I might be interested in buying into part of the company, but I was like, well, he probably wouldn't want me to be part of, would not want me to be a face of the company or anything like that.
Dude, so I'm really sorry for your company's loss and for the world's loss and whoever passed, but like, that's a really great example that I thank you for sharing, because one of the things I found for myself is in my fear of what everybody will say, I become my biggest detractor. I shut myself down in order to protect myself before I ever give anyone else the opportunity to do that. And so in this example, I can relate to that because a lot of times I won't ask for what I want out of fear of being rejected or being wrong or being stupid for having asked. And then as a result, I rob myself of the things that usually people are willing to consider. Hit +1 in the chat if you can relate to David, not asking for what you want, like not even being willing to ask and then be rejected, as opposed to like, it is insane how our brain is something that we trust so much, and what a crazy liar that it is. And David, I appreciate what you shared because I didn't miss it, that you think because of things that you've done in the past, you're not worthy of the things that you want. I saw a bunch of +1s come through, but hit +1 if you think that if all your dreams were to come true, you would feel like you weren't worthy of them, like you didn't deserve them. More +1s coming through. So here's the deal, David, thank you for sharing your weakness. And so now I want anyone to think about any questions that they have for me as we use the balance of our time, and we're going to pick, and if someone wants to do a share, they can type share. But I want to use what David just shared as a point. You guys are not all on the same team, right? So you're disparate Petra members in some way, probably all over the country, different sizes of companies, different roles. I want you to look at your chat and look at how many +1s are in the chat. And then ask yourself, how crazy is it that everybody's sitting there with similar fears, similar challenges, but we're still believing this narrative that we have to wear the mask and pretend that we're strong, that we have to make sure that we say yes to everybody, that we can't have any weaknesses, that if we have a difficult conversation, we're going to get rejected. Dude, you want to inspire people? You don't have to be responsible for other people to be a leader. Whoever you are, someone is watching you. Someone is watching you right now, and they are learning how to lead themselves. If you can learn how to overcome that obstacle and that fear, you not only lead yourself, but you lead others. I'm not an idiot. I know that sharing the fact that I'm a drug addict and sharing my story earns respect and interest from you guys. And the reason that it is because everybody roots for the underdog, because deep down, everybody feels like the underdog. And so if you as a leader can lead yourself through that stuff and start to get really good at saying no and sharing weaknesses and having difficult conversations and sharing your unique perspective, and then you share with the people that are watching how you do it because you're using a specific process, that's leadership that transcends business. That's just leadership in life. And that's what we learn in recovery from addiction as an addict. A sponsor is very different than a CEO of a company or even a mentor or a coach. They don't tell you what you should do. They tell you what they did. Most leaders want to tell you, hey, I struggled once too. And they tell you the story and then they give you the silver lining. But a truly inspiring leader recognizes that most of us are in the middle of a story where we haven't gotten to the silver lining yet. And so a really great leader doesn't say, I struggle too. They say, I'm in the middle of the shit right now. I have no idea how the story ends, but watch what I do next and walk with me, because I will share my process with you, because I know that you need to lead yourself through something too. That level of leadership, people will jump ship. They will go to different companies and different teams in order to be able to be led by someone who's willing to do that for them. And all it requires is taking off the mask. So I'm going to get off my soapbox. I want to thank you guys so much for your attention and the opportunity to carry this message. And for those of you that put your email in the chat and you're interested in the rehab, thank you for demonstrating that interest. We will be in touch. And I don't know if there were any other questions that were submitted, but I'm obviously not in a rush to leave, but I want to be
We have about
respectful.
10 minutes left. If anyone has any last minute questions you want to ask Michael, go ahead and throw them in the chat and the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on that. Michael, that was really, really a powerful session. I thank you so much for being vulnerable with us. And I appreciate the knowledge you always bring. You're such a good friend to Petra. People are saying that in the chat now. It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. We had some comments on Facebook about how great it was. To everyone else on here, thank you so much for attending. You'll receive a recap, and included will be the resources that Mike's mentioned, and then also a link to rewatch this and to share it with your teams. We also have a number of other upcoming events on our website, including our one-day ascent that's coming up next month. Go to petracoach.com, events tab, or reach out at info@petracoach.com. I'm going to check the chat one more time. Just lots of thank yous. I got to sign up for rehab. I've got a list of those that I'll send over to you, Mike. And it says, how do you handle meetings where there are dominant people and not feeling how to speak your mind?
How do you handle meetings where there are dominant people and you're scared to speak your mind?
Ken, is that where we're
Or
going?
not knowing how to?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So I'll tell you a quick story. So I was invited to this meeting with like all of the thought leaders in healthcare in Nashville. So like, you know, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce was there, the CEO of the Healthcare Council was there, and all these people were there, and they were talking about how do they make it so that healthcare data is available to all patients. And I won't bore you with the details, but like they were talking about all this like political and philosophical stuff that was just like, to me, was we were just talking to talk, and we didn't actually have a practical solution. And so I started to be frustrated, and I wanted to just like ask, like, dude, you want to empower entrepreneurs to solve this problem? Literally show me where I can plug my laptop into some data and I'll solve the problem. Get off of these platitudes, like just help me. But I felt stupid. I felt simple for like wanting to say that, because they were talking about Washington, D.C. and Medicare and legislators, and they were using all these big fancy words. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what the heck they're talking about, man. Here's what I imagined. When it finally became my opportunity to talk, I would say what I was really thinking, and they would think that I was simple, stupid, naive, and that I didn't belong. But here's what I did. I asked myself, you go back to the 3 principles that we teach. Practice rigorous authenticity means being true to myself in word and action, anywhere and everywhere, no matter the risk. And so I had practice in doing that. But the only way we can tolerate the risk is if we learn how to surrender what might happen. And so I had to let go of what might happen and see the victory, not in how they respond, but the victory in me sharing my perspective. And so if you can rewire your brain through practice to see your victory in living and leading mask free, as opposed to what you will get as a result of it, you can stop worrying about dominant personalities that may dismiss you. I did my TED Talk in flip-flops, and I was scared to do that. And there were so many comments on my flip-flop. There were more comments on my flip-flops that were positive than on the fact that I said great leaders should do what drug addicts do. It was crazy. But I was able to surrender the outcome, so I wore the flip-flops. I actually thought I should wear shoes. I want to be true to myself. So if you find yourself in a meeting with a lot of dominant personalities, see the sharing as the victory, not what they do in response. And so to tie up that story, I said, hey guys, this is probably too simple, but I'm just an entrepreneur with a laptop. I just want some data and I'll solve your problem. Where do I get it? And I'll never forget, this woman who I really respected, and I didn't know that well, was sitting right next to me. I might get emotional with sharing it. And I thought everybody was going to say I was stupid. And she turns to me and she goes, I like your style. She loved that I just cut through all the BS, and a bunch of other people didn't. That's fine. You know what? My job in the world is to collect a bunch of haters, but collect a few fans in the process. And I would charge that the same is true for you. All right. Thank you for that question.
We got one more question if we got time. I think we got 5 minutes. If
Yeah.
that's okay. Yeah. How do you get the risk-taking position of maxing out your credit cards and cleaning out your IRA to try to launch a business? How do you make yourself jump off the ledge?
Goes back to what we learn as recovering addicts. So like most leaders are not taught to surrender the outcome. We're taught to focus and obsess over things that we can't control. We all experience this. When we went through an election, regardless of what side you were on, after you cast your vote, you had no control. But how many of us wasted time on CNN and on TV trying to track what was happening? Well, leaders do this all the time. They're monitoring metrics. They're trying, oh, why isn't that employee performing the way I want? They waste a tremendous amount of time. And so they don't know how to surrender the outcome because we're not taught to do that. We're taught to own it, to obsess it, to control it. Addicts are taught to surrender the outcome. And so when it came time to take that risk taking, it wasn't easy. And I don't have the time to unpack the story that really enabled me to do it. But I would sum it up as I'd spent 8 years practicing surrender the outcome prior to that moment. And it put me in an incredible position to be able to do it. I see we have one more question. Can I answer it from Kathleen?
I think that was all the questions we've got right now.
Well, I see another one. How do you let go of the feeling like I am my mistakes when your past mistakes cost important work and personal relationships in your life? Are you seeing that in the Q&A panel?
I can't see it, but you go ahead.
Okay. So how do you let go of the feeling I am my mistakes when your past mistakes cost important work and personal relationships in your life and these people still hold it against you and they don't forgive you? Dude, if there's someone that knows how to answer that freaking question, it's a drug addict, because I had a lot of regret and I had a lot of people that held what I did against me for a long period of time. Goes back to learning how to surrender the outcome. I could not control my past. I could control my present and my future. So many of us bear the burden of our past mistakes to the point where it hinders our ability to be present and do what's necessary to be successful in this moment. I will share an intensely vulnerable and scary thing to share right now with you guys that happened to me on Saturday. My daughter is 2 years old and she's in this phase where she's hitting and she's learning how to hit. And I have a son that's 6 months old and he's this beautiful little blob that can't defend himself. And she wound up and she hit him smack on the head. And out of instinct, I pushed her back and she fell. Like she was sitting down on carpet. It wasn't the end of the world. And my wife had this horrified look in her face. And suddenly I felt like, oh my God, I'm an abuser. I didn't hit her or anything. I just pushed her back, but it was forceful enough that I regretted it. And I had to tell her that I was sorry. And they went up for a nap or something like that. And I just sat there sitting in how bad I felt about what I had just done. But surrender the outcome kicked in. And I realized, man, no matter how much I would love to take that moment back, I can't control that it happened. See, old me, what I would have done was, out of regret or whatever, I would have left or tried to explain why it wasn't a problem or try to cover it up or whatever. But I just sat there and I said, what do I need to do different? And I started to think through the things I'd learned in recovery. And I was like, okay, so next time that she hits him, I'm going to remember this moment. And I'm just going to remember that I wish I'd made a different choice. That I just picked her up and removed her as opposed to pushing her. And the other thing was that I could control, so I could learn. So many of us get so distracted by the pain, we don't learn. But the other thing that I could control was when they came back down is if I really owned it. And that's what you learn as an addict. You got to own the mistakes you made in the past, and then you got to make amends and change who you are in order to be different in the future. But so many of us get locked into these internal stories of how bad we are because of the things that we did, whether it was a moment ago or 10 years ago, that we waste all that precious energy that we could spend learning how to be different and controlling what we can in the future. And so, Kathleen, I love your question. And I know I gave you kind of a high level thing. So email me, Mike@michaelbrody-waite.com, or, Michael Brody-Waite, Mike@michaelbrody-waite.com, michaelbrody-waite.com. I don't care. Social. Send me a note if that didn't help, and we can get into some particulars. But in general, it's amazing how much time we waste focusing on what we can't control, which is the past, instead of controlling what we can learn and what we can do differently in the future.
All right, we are right up on time here. Michael, thank you again so much for being with us today. And thank you everyone for attending. Again, check out our website for more upcoming events. And if you have any further questions for Michael, I will include his email address in the recap so you can reach out. Thank you guys for
Awesome.
joining us today, and everyone have a great rest of your Monday.
Thank you.